One of the students came up to me and said, "Father, there's something I must ask you about addiction." The question is addiction a sin? Good question. How can we look at this? Now, first question is, what is sin? Sin is any deliberate choice of your will towards things that are not of God or things that God forbids, anything that's in violation of goodness, beauty, and truth. So to choose to demean your neighbor, to choose to use the sexual abilities outside of marriage, to choose to squander your money that you should have given to the poor and thus you can't give to the poor in the church. Those are sins, right? Active choices, whether manifested in the exterior realm or if they're manifested just in your own head to give assent. Oh yeah, I should make fun of this person, right? You've sinned because you've cooperated, you've agreed to the idea, the temptation in your head. Well, what's addiction? Addiction, the idea of addiction is that you have cooperated with something so much that you've lost your free will. So some people wonder, well, is addiction a sin because you're no longer choosing to do the thing? But the problem is that addiction was still brought about by your repeated choosing over and over again to do the thing, thus making yourself less likely to be able to resist it. And that way we consider maybe addiction in some ways similar to vice, but vice on an even greater level. Now, in some regards, people say that maybe addiction lessens, decreases your culpability for your choice. Well, he didn't really know what he was doing because he's kind of addicted to that because he started at a young age. But that doesn't always satisfy everyone as an explanation because they did still choose it. They did still choose it and choose it again and again. Now, there are things that can lessen your culpability for a sin, extenuating circumstances that with your confessor you might understand lowers your culpability, your responsibility for a sin. And addiction might be one of those things. Now, another aspect to our student's question about addiction and sin is just whether addiction itself is a sin by the fact that you've maybe, and here I think the student was using addiction in loose terms, not in the clinical understanding of addiction, but more on the idea of, oh, I'm just so addicted to peanut butter M&Ms, I just can't quit them. In that sense of the word, addiction might be a sin in the sense that maybe you've weakened your ability to say no to something. Maybe you've weakened your ability to say no to a lesser good for the sake of a greater good, right? If you're confronted by, for example, peanut butter M&Ms when you're within the hour fast for Mass, you decide to eat the peanut butter M&Ms rather than to receive the Holy Communion, well, yeah, that'd be sinful that you put yourself in that state where you can't choose, you can't see the difference between a few moments of the taste of peanut butter M&Ms and the spiritual fruit of the most holy sacrament of the altar. So in that sense, addiction would be a sin. So again, even though you're not clinically addicted to something, but you're still using a good thing, but using in a disproportionate way, a way that's out of the way it should be used, well then that is a sin. So to the question from our student, is addiction a sin? Well, again, it depends. It can be in this sense. But if you have an actual addiction, alcoholism or something like that, can that lessen your culpability for that sin? Yeah, it can lessen it, but you still have a responsibility and you still owe some of the weight of that responsibility for entering into that situation in the first place. It's a road that, for the most part, you probably led yourself down. All those things considered, the best choice is always not to sin, right? Thinking of the 1980s movie War Games. I don't know if you've seen that, might be too deep of a pull, but in that movie, there's this thinking, self-aware computer that the government has that tries to figure out how to win thermonuclear war. And it says, a strange game. It seems like the best move is not to start. How about a nice game of chess? So in some ways, with addiction, with sin, the best move is not to play, right? The best move is to choose goodness, to choose beauty, to choose